listening to The Motherhood Experience, a podcast where you are part of the conversation with moms, for moms, and by moms. Let's jump into this episode with me, your host, Val Kleppen. Well, hello and welcome back to the Motherhood Experience podcast. Today, I am joined by a panel. Candace Alford, Angella Moore, and Chelsa Jons join me today to talk about a recap of the Overflow Ministries Women's Conference that took place at the end of March, where I was the keynote speaker and they were part of the phenomenal team who planned, executed, organized this event. It was Candace, Angela, Chelsa, Rachel, Martha, and Kate. And I'm sure they had other help from other volunteers too, but that was the team that kind of pulled everything together to make this conference happen. What is so special and unique about it is this is a rural ministry. So it's not some big city event. They bring big city type events to their small community to make connections with other women, to foster relationships with one another, and to really just minister to the community itself, not just the community where they live, but the community that these types of events create. I so enjoyed this conversation with them. We talked about what's involved in planning. We talked about the surprises, the expectations. We talked about even what happens after the event. And this was really eye-opening for me, hearing kind of their perspective as an outsider to the most of the planning of this event. But also it was so encouraging just to know that community is essentially what you build, what you make of it. And it is possible. And it isn't out of anyone's reach to create community, to create events where this kind of relationship building and connecting is really fostered and nurtured. I really enjoyed this conversation with Angela, Candace, and Chelsa, and I'm sure you will enjoy it too. So let's get into it. All right. I am so pleased to be joined with part of the team from Overflow Ministries who planned, organized, executed the women's conference that was just a month ago. I have with me Candace, Chelsa, and Angela. I'm going to have them introduce themselves. And ladies, we start every episode with age of kids and stage of motherhood you're in. I don't see why this episode should be any different. So we'll do that again. Candace, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you for having me back, Val. Yes, I am a mother of three. My oldest is 11. Then I have a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old. They are as different as night and day, all of them. One's night, one's day, and one's off in a different far off land. And so it keeps things interesting, but it's good. I am transitioning into the whole not being a stay-at-home mom full time because my kids are all in school. So navigating between that and being a farmer rancher help hand. So that's been an adventure as well. But on the side, I get to do ministry with these lovely ladies, and it's just been a wild ride to see where God's leading it. So.
Yes, I love that. Chelsa, how about you?
All right. So my oldest 3 kids are about to have birthdays. So I've been saying they're going to be 12, 10, and 8 this spring. And then my youngest is going to be 5 in July. So I'm kind of a little bit in a transition. I would say I have one still at home. So I'm at home full time, but also just on the cusp, I think, of being like the constantly on the go phase of motherhood where my kids are getting pretty active into sports. I help with the children's ministry on Wednesdays. And so just kind of figuring out like who has to be where, when, who's picking them up, who's taking them, who needs a lunch, that kind of a thing. So I know it's going to get crazier in a hurry, but we're just still trying to soak in like the sweetness of not having every night planned for us yet. And just appreciating those slower days when we have them. And my husband is full blow, like go right now in the spring. We calve out lots of cows, so he's busy with that. So like Candace said, I try to help where I can with that and just, making 3 meals a day every day. So whoever shows up, we'll feed you.
Angela.
Yeah, hi. I have 4 kiddos, ages 14, 12, 10, and 8. The oldest is going to be going into high school this fall. So we are in the go, go, go. Who's where? Are we going to all be in the right place at the right time stage? But I work full time for Nebraska Wesleyan in Lincoln, Nebraska, as a campus visit coordinator. So, was stay-at-home mom for 10.5 years, went to part-time work, and now have made my way into full-time. And my husband is actually just wrapping up getting his teaching certification in 7 through 12 history. So we've kind of done the flip-flop a little bit, but we're still doing full-time, both of us, in just different kind of views than what it had been for a while. So just navigating through that and seeing what the Lord has next for us.
So this is even more amazing to me, because hearing and knowing how busy all of us are, and yet you pulled off a phenomenal women's conference weekend, even between all of the schedules, not just your own schedules, but the kids and each other and coordinating all of that. I want to dive into the logistics of that. But first, all right, so Candace, I know that we have either alluded to or shared, maybe even in the previous podcast episode where you were a guest here. If not, we'll link to several things in this episode. Check the show notes. But can you give us an elevator pitch for kind of how Overflow got started and what the mission for these women's conference weekends is?
Yes, I would love to. I better be on a really long elevator ride because my pitch isn't usually super short, so I'll try to keep
Ready, go.
it. Okay. So Overflow Ministries actually began about 5 years ago, but it kind of stemmed out of a mom's ministry that we had started, back in 2016. My husband and I moved back to the area, and I had 2 kids. I had just had a miscarriage, so I knew I was kind of wanting to have another child. And so I was in that heat of, I'm in this motherhood, I need other women. And there was other women around, and so we had planted, Chelsa was in on that. And so we've been doing ministry since then. And it was after a conference in Lincoln, actually, that I attended back in 2019, that God really just got a hold of my heart. And it was that whole, this is the all in prayer I prayed. And after that moment, I just asked God, okay, God, what do you want me to do next? And he gave me the idea of, you need to bring what you experienced here to your area. So our main mission is to encourage women to have confidence to transform the gospel in their lives, but in our communities, and to strengthen the relationships that we have and expand the body of Christ. But so our main vision was to bring the big city opportunities that we can't hear and bring them here to small town rural area, because a lot of us are married to farmers, ranchers, or we have a bajillion children that go 8 other directions. And so that is what God has allowed us to do in these last 5 years, is to provide opportunity for that. And we always have our plans, right? But God has exceeded them each and every year that we do the conference. And so it's just been really cool, the connections we've made, and kind of the direction we're going with that. So,
yeah. And this question could be for any of the 3 of you. When it comes to rural ministry, Angela is experiencing connectivity issues. Speaking of rural, she's not even rural. What makes putting on a conference like this in a teeny tiny town or rural community, what are the challenges for that?
sign up for sure. When we say Holy Spirit activate, we mean that with all of our heart, because I think the past 2 years we've had the same way of registration, but even the people who register online are at least an hour or so away. The people around here, they're kind of like, we'll see what the weekend brings. And we're like, okay. And it always works out, and it's always great. But that is, I don't know, Chelsea, you chime in. For me, and maybe it's just when we get down to go time, we're like, okay, what's the head count? How many are we going to have for food and all the things? And that seems to always kind of be the area that we're kind of waiting on confirmation. But
yeah, I think that definitely makes it a little challenging, especially for if you're a type A and planner and you want to know the numbers. So we have to go on faith a lot and just trust that God's going to work and people are going to come, and the people that need to be there will be there. And I do think it's a little bit of a challenge where we are trying to create an experience that people are not accustomed to around here, maybe. And so it feels weird and like just maybe unfamiliar. And so I think to get people to take the leap of faith and just come and see if they like it, instead of maybe staying home because they don't know what it's going to be, or make an excuse. It's easy to make an excuse when you don't really know what you're getting yourself into. So I do think sometimes there's a little bit of that. And it's crazy to me how we have similar numbers every year, but so many times it's new people and they come because maybe they know the speaker, or maybe, it just worked for them this weekend. Like, weekends in the spring are always busy. So, I mean, as far as that goes, just the scheduling in itself can be tricky. But like I said, I think we just kind of have to pick our day and just step out in faith and just kind of leave the rest to God,
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm just going to chime in on that a little bit too, Val. So I remember the first year we did it, we did worship together, and there was a handful of women that came and they had never done that before. So they were like, that was really weird that we sang those songs together. And so like that's been ingrained in my mind because, I grew up in church and you just go and you sing together, and that wasn't a foreign thing, but I never realized how some of these women are totally outside their element. They're stepping into the unknown. Like Chelsa had said, they don't know what they're getting into. I mean, I think we had our biggest church crowd from our church, from our local church come this year. And they were even saying, why have we never come to this? And we're all like, I don't know. Why didn't you ever come to this? But sometimes I think it's just they don't know what it's about. And as a small town, small ministry, it's hard to get it, to figure out how to advertise, market, or whatever, because you have those who are on social media, those who read the newspaper, those who listen to radio. And it's so hard to navigate and like pinpoint how everybody's going to hear about it. So,
Yeah.
But we've had really good feedback, especially this year, with ways to expand that awareness too. So that's been really helpful.
Yeah. All right. So, Chelsea, one question I have for you then is, when Candace came to you and said that she had this idea, this is what she wanted to do, what sparked your interest in wanting to get involved?
So I would say mom's group started, it's been a while, but I do remember like we met at the coffee shop and Candace kind of like came to us with the idea. And at that time, so I like didn't grow up in the church or wasn't a Christian until my senior year of high school. So then I didn't have a lot of like Christian friends. So Candace was like pretty much my only Christian friend, I would say. And so I feel like just wanting to grow a community of believers was probably my biggest motivation for joining that, and just understanding like I didn't, just you don't want to do it on your own. So you link arms, and when your best friend starts a ministry, I feel like that's kind of my personality. It was like, yeah, I'm going to join you. I'll do it. What do you want me to do? Kind of a thing.
Let's go.
Yeah. And so that's kind of always been my role. I feel like in Moms and Overflow is just like more so, just tell me what you need me to do.
So real quick, this is editing Val, by the way. Hey, how you doing? This episode had so many technical glitches. And so we just had one right here. So there's a little pause in this, and then we come back and we just kind of jump back into the conversation. Then eventually I got completely booted off the call. They tried to take over and host a new podcast, which was amazing. And then toward the end of the call, one of our panelists, Angela, just, even though we could see her and we could hear her in the recording, she completely dropped off. And so I'm coming in here to tell you this was a mess. But it was completely out of our control. And even though we had all of these technical glitches, we still had such an amazing conversation, and we're rolling with it. So I'm just inserting myself here to let you know there were some issues, okay? But we powered through. It's still a great episode, and make sure you stay till the end, especially when they start taking over and making their own podcast. Absolute comedic gold, ladies. Thanks so much. Please continue.
All right. So I would say women's ministry isn't always necessarily my first thought of where I thrive in ministry. I love to hang out with high school kids and talk Jesus with them. I think because that's when I met Jesus. So I really connect with them on that level. So sometimes it's been a challenge to know my place. In the moms group, I was in it for a while, and then I did step back just because I think maybe I had another baby or something, life changes. And so I took a break from that. And then when we started talking about shifting to Overflow and doing a conference, which is once a year versus like moms group, we were meeting twice a month. So I felt like that was more doable for me. And I still, I love the community aspect of it. I love being helpful and trying to encourage other people, no matter, women, kids, whoever. So I think that's just kind of where I saw myself fitting in, is just kind of maybe filling in the gaps. I've been told I'm a good sounding board for ideas and just kind of that like middle ground in a group setting, I guess. So I think that's kind of the role that I've just found within these ministry groups.
I love that. And Angela, your story is a little unique too, because you are you're 4 hours away. How did you tie yourself in with this? What motivated you to be involved?
Yeah, so I am 4 hours away, but I grew up in Spencer and have known Candace since she was a baby. But her dad was my pastor. I graduated with her older sister in high school. But my grandparents are part of the Calvary Bible Church there in Bonesteel. And I had a pretty unique relationship with my grandpa. My dad passed away 26 years ago, and grandpa was just a big part of my life. He walked me down the aisle when I got married. So if that gives you an indication on who he is in my world, he just had a lot of influence. He prayed for all of his grandkids, and my grandma still does. She is 91 years old, and I have no idea how in the heck she keeps us all straight because she just does. And she's got 3 great grandkids. I'm not even sure how many greats there are in there. But they have always just prayed for us by name, and they have prayed for Calvary Bible Church, and they have prayed to see this church grow, for young families to be there. It's pretty fun to get to be the fly on the wall and get to come once a year and just get to see what has been prayed for so many years. I mean, for as long as I can recall. We kind of laugh, but my grandpa was really good at being on the phone and having his own phone ministry. And so it's really cool. Some of the other parts that are just encourage me are Candace's and Chelsa's husbands were in my grandpa's Sunday school class. Like, I went fishing with them growing up, and ice fishing and all the things. So to just see it become full circle is just really, really fun. And it's fun to get to be a part of the ministry with these women after seeing how my grandparents have invested in their family over the years.
So last year was my first year going because I am friends with Michelle, heard she was speaking, heard she was going to be in this town that I'd never heard of before, found out I was 3 hours away from it, and went down, fell in love, loved the conference, loved the community, loved the experience. What is it that maybe surprised you, either pleasantly or not so much, about this year, how it came together, how it all worked out? What are some of the things that you learned or were excited or surprised by this year?
I don't know. I felt like, we talked earlier about how it's kind of been, what is Overflow Ministries? What's this women conference? What does that entail? And I just felt like this year it connected. Like, people are getting it. People are understanding kind of what the conference is, what it's about. But for me personally, just, being on the end of making sure, the crazy circus stays together, I was at peace. Like, my mind, which never happens, was at peace knowing that it didn't matter what we did, because God was going to show up, because he has in the past, not just in our conferences, but in our lives. And we each have our own story. We could attest to that. But just with this conference, and, our theme was Stronger Together. And for me, I started off the year when we decided this was our theme. I started off, whether I realized I was doing it or not, just like making myself be alone. And that sounds silly, but I just kind of put myself in this spot thinking, okay, we're going to get this done, this, and this. And I was totally negating what God was trying to do in and through our, servant team. And so that was a wake up call for me. And so we kind of went over some humps with, figuring out what that truly means for our team. Because if our team can't be stronger together, then how are we going to, bring that in this ministry? And so for me, once we kind of got over that and through the fog of it, I was just excited to see what God was going to do, because I can try to do everything in my power, in my energy, and I'm going to fail every time. I may go for a little while, but I'm going to fail. And I have these ladies, some that aren't even on here right now, that stand by. And they are like, I've been here this whole time. Why didn't you ask? And I think it goes, both ways. But I was pleasantly surprised with the peace of the whole conference, and even just how, each year it comes through, and you go through, it's like planning a wedding. You go through all this crazy hoopla, and then you're like, did that just happen? Like, where was that wedding? But it just went smooth. And I think it was just exciting to just kind of see God in every detail, in every conversation that I was able to be a part of, and see some of these women, like Chelsea had mentioned earlier. We've had about the same number of women each year, but the people coming are so different. I mean, we may have a few who come back every year and they're like, we can't wait for this. This is so great. But to just see a few of those familiar faces return and be like, this is what we look forward to. And so that's really cool.
I think for me, I love how Friday night is growing, because I kind of feel like if somebody's going to be on the fence, that it would be for Friday night. Because if you tell people they're coming for worship and testimony, like, that is deep stuff a lot of times, and like pretty vulnerable, I guess. Like, worship always brings me to tears. And when people share their testimony, like, I don't know, it's just so personal. And so for me, I love Friday night. And so to see Friday night growing really encourages me. And it's not because I get to play the games or anything. It's not why I love it. But I just love testimony. I feel like there's so much power in it. And I just, the worship is always so good. And we have different people every time, but it just, like Candace said, it comes together and you just see God show up. And yeah, I just love that. I mean, obviously you do want people to come back every year and love it every year. But I think as we go on and as you do ministry, the longer you're in it, you just realize it's never really about the numbers, like, it's totally quality over quantity, I would say. And you just, God's going to work things out. And so you don't have to care, like, if you break records or if you have more people than last year or less, it's just not what's important. So I just, yeah, I don't know. I think just seeing people kind of step out and get vulnerable and throw their hands up in worship, I love seeing that, because I would say it's just not maybe the norm around here as far as like church is, it's more of, I don't know, but not to say anything bad about church around here, but just maybe less charismatic or, that kind of a thing. People are more comfortable just in their comfort zones, like we all are. So that's been fun for me to see.
To jump on that too. So the very first year we did it, we did not have a Friday night testimony and worship. And this is going to sound super warped, but I don't believe this is why it happened. But remember the first time the first conference, there was some women who said, this is weird to worship, to sing together. So what do? We add a whole night just for that, It's like, hey, come on, let's make it awkward. But a big thing, I think, was it's just such a way to prepare yourself for what Saturday would hold, and I think we're getting there, like Chelsea said, and it is, I mean, I felt like our Friday numbers before were smaller, but it is cool. And you do a great job with the games and rocking those bibs every year.
Do you have anything to add to that, Angela?
The ladies have said it perfectly.
To what Angela said, though, where that perspective that she brings from knowing that her grandparents were praying over the community and just like watching all of that come to fruition. In our church, we have a tiny church, really. I mean, but we have as many kids as adults in our church. And when we do kids praise, the stage is full. Like, there is no shortage of young people in our little church. And so I just think that's very cool. I knew Angela's grandpa. He's my husband's grandpa's brother. So they're twins, actually. So we have that connection. And he was a very special man. And I know he would be tickled just to see, all the ministry going on and just all that God is doing in the community. So very cool perspective.
one of the things that was commented to me about this year, the people that I brought also loving it, is just the sense of community, the small town, everybody knows each other. I mean, maybe not, but like at least names, or there's definitely a sense of familiarity. And so then you have people like us from 3 hours out of town who, show up and we're like, oh, this is so darling and charming and endearing, I think are the words that I used last year. But it is that. But are you going for more of getting your own community involved or creating a community within, the South Dakota, Nebraska area, or is it some of both?
So I grew up in Nebraska, and our church is in South Dakota. And growing up, it's 9 miles till the South Dakota border. But it was like super weird. People just didn't go across the border. It was like, I don't know if you watch Parks and Rec, but it's like Eagleton and help me out here. Eagleton and Pawnee, yeah, they just don't mesh, and it was so weird. But it's like I love coming up to South Dakota, but it was just such a weird thing. So maybe I think part of that, Val, is wanting to connect and create that community. But again, just being blown away by the people who do travel. Chelsea mentioned people will travel far if they know the speaker, or if they're aware of what it is that we're doing too. But when this was the first just a thought, of course, I was at a Beth Moore conference when, it took root. So I'm thinking, we're going to have lights on a stage. Beth Moore is eventually going to come and speak, like all these really big ideas. But God just really kind of pulled back the reins. And he's like, we got to start small. And I mean, just look what he's done in 5 years. And so the community that he is creating is just so cool. And my prayer too, just especially after this year and just the themes that have developed each year, is that our core team just grows stronger through that. Because we were just talking, all of our core team goes to our same church, which is the church that is now growing, which is the church that is expanding. And it is just really cool to see that, to just have that unity and to have that one central core that everything is stemming from too. So
Yeah. So what were some of the highlights? I would love to hear this, myself. Well, let's think of this as a feedback panel. I will remain an unbiased podcast host. But what were some of your favorite parts or takeaways or new experiences that came about this year?
Well, I was talking with the keynote speaker we had. She was great. You guys should check her out sometime. But when I was talking to her after the conference, she had shared some of the things that escaped her mouth that were not in her notes. And I affirmed her. Those were the things I wrote in my notes. So they were so good, Val. Like they were so good. And you're hilarious. It was great. And it was just, I don't know. And then even having like the worship leaders, we had Misty and Katie, and it's mother-daughter-in-law duo. That was not on the docket when we started planning. But again, God has a plan for everything. And big shout out to Katie. Katie started attending our church when her and her husband moved back. And she's got a beautiful voice, and she's scared spitless to stand up on stage and sing in front of people. So one of my strong suits is to make people feel very uncomfortable. It's kind of a sick, weird thing that I have. But she now leads worship at our church, and she's leading conferences, and she's done different things. So I think that was just her heartbeat this year too. We've had a lot of conversations, and like not even in that area of that, but it just happened to allow that connection with her and her mother-in-law. So that was really cool. I do have one more. Sorry, girls, I'll stop so you can. There was a gal who came up to me and told me, she just grabbed my arms and she looked familiar. And she's like, I have been waiting to come all year. And I was like, oh, I'm really glad you're here. Because I was like, I know you came back, And she said, Candace, I almost died 9 months ago. And I was like, okay. So then she started telling me her story. And she told me, and I'm not going to give it away because we're going to share more on that another time. But she said when she came out of a coma, out of being in there for 6 days, she said, I cannot wait to go to the Overflow Women's Conference to tell them what God did. So it is a community that's being built, whether we're realizing it or not. And I think that's so cool. I think it blows my mind because sometimes we get distracted by the planning and the details that we're not in I don't know, being able to be involved. And I shared with you before the conference, God was giving me 2 words: to be aware and available. And that's what I wanted to be, at the conference, not just for the details that it goes well, but just to truly be aware of what's going on and be available to have conversations or to pray or whatever that looks like. So
I can go next. I love your approach, Val, in that you make us laugh, but you have us crying and everything in between. And to me, I love it when like Christians can let loose a little bit, and we don't have to like look like we just bit a lemon all the time, and just like, and just laugh and have fun and be real with each other, because I feel like that's just what everyone desires anyways, is that authenticity, and you bring that so well. And when you shared like your personal stories, I loved that. Like you're yelling at your coyote that was gonna eat your chickens. I was dying
That
laughing.
that was not in my notes.
Yeah, but not. But it was so great. It was so fun. And like, my mother-in-law came, and it's her first time. She's always been out of town the last few years. And she said the same thing. She's like, I was laughing and I was crying and I just loved every minute of it. And so I just think that's really great, is when you can just be your real self. And, I think it's a fault of a lot of us Christians. We feel like we have to have this certain persona or whatever. And so when a group of gals gets together and just gets real and down to the nitty gritty of life, I just think that's always great. I loved also, I sat in the back for worship and testimony night, and I was watching some of the women nod their heads with you in like the hardest parts of your story. And I could just like feel their hurt almost with them. And like they were like, yes, like I've been through it too. And it was really encouraging, because at the end of the night, when you stuck around to talk with people and pray with them if they needed it, like several of the gals that I noticed, like I can tell like they need a hug right now, they came and talked to you, and you had the chance to pray with them, and they stepped out and came forward, and they weren't scared of it, and they embraced it. And I just know, God was working through that completely, because that stuff's hard, and you don't just do that in your own power. It's, you want to sit in that chair and just not show everybody your brokenness. But I think some women, and I never talked to you about it, but I just trust that they really got vulnerable, and you were able to just really speak into where they were hurting and where they needed it. And so I love that.
Tell you that Friday night was so powerful, and part of the power in that was me being able to hold it together, because I heard some heartache and some stories that I was never prepared to hear. And I do really believe and know that the Lord was present in that room. He gave me insight for how to pray over these women, and there was one woman in particular I prayed for. And I thought it was weird, which is funny that I thought it was weird considering I had just given a testimony about this very thing. But I just started praying for some very specific things that I had never met this woman before in my life. And she started laughing when I was praying these very
Chelsa, you're leading this.
Take over now.
You're leading this.
Welcome to the new and improved motherhood experience. Yeah.
Check out the fish behind Chelsa.
my word. Oh, and then it started recording immediately when I came back. What on earth? Okay, so as I was saying, she started laughing when I was praying these very specific things. And at the end of it, she goes, "How did you know?" And I didn't know any of that. And then she went on to share some things with me, and I was like, oh Lord, there's no way, unless you were right here right now, that these things would have been prayed over this woman who's going through these things. And so it was so powerful Friday night. And I've never had the experience where women are lining up to speak with me and share with me. Like, it's been a handful here and there. Okay. Lining up Friday, Saturday. It was I felt so honored, but also like like, I don't deserve to hear these women's hearts and vulnerability. Like, who am I, to hear all of this? But it was so moving for me, especially after some of the things that came out of my mouth. I'm like, why did I just share that? But it was so powerful and so moving, Friday night especially. So I just had to interject that there. But also, Angela, what about you?
Yeah. Saturday was great, but I'm going to be honest, Friday, seeing women that came from the church that Candace and I grew up in that had never been there. Like, we've had many discussions of like, why? Like, and Candace has kind of alluded to this, of the fact that like, you just don't cross the border, which wasn't what I was used to, because we crossed the border because that's where Grandma and Grandpa went to church. And like, I can't tell you how many times on Easter Sunday we did sunrise service with the Wesleyan church, then we made it to our church, and then all of a sudden, look out, we got third breakfast, we're headed to Bonesdale. So yeah, I just seen the people that showed up. Candace's mom was there for the first time, which was just, she was my babysitter growing up. I mean, she was my second mom. I don't know. It was just a huge answer to prayer that we've been praying over too, of just like, can we just break this barrier between Nebraska and South Dakota? And I think just this barrier of like, these are the two churches that God has called us to in this small rural area that like we grew up in, and now we have connections to and leading in and whatever it may be. That it was just really, really encouraging to see this massive amount of people that I just was not expecting to get to see, and getting to greet them at the door and being like, these are the women that have invested in me and Awana and Sunday school. And I don't know, it was that just touched my heart. And then on top of it, I got to bring my daughter this year, and for her to get to see that, like, her whole thing has always been like, Mom, you know everybody. And I'm like, well, I don't know everybody, but it's really encouraging, I think, for her to even get to see the ladies that have invested in my relationship with Jesus, and how that's impacting my family. And like, for her to get to see that in real life is pretty awesome.
So what about the effects it has in relationships outside of the conference? So you're working together, planning the conference, you pull it off phenomenally, by the way. People come, they talk to you about it, but then the conference ends and everyone goes back to work or school or life or all of the above. What is the dynamic then with relationships after the fact?
The week after the conference ended, I had multiple conversations with people who'd come for the first time, wanting to help start a women's conference for them in their hometown and do that. And it kind of goes back to the community thing that you had said. We can do those things and provide those, but it takes away from the community that's being built there. But I've encouraged them to like stay connected, and you've encouraged this too. And we've talked about trying to start a newsletter to keep these women involved, because you know what, you might not all have Facebook and all the things, but everybody's got an email address, right? I believe so, hopefully. But I'm hoping to be able to connect with everybody through that, and not just like in 6 months and let them know when we're going to have the next year, but to really involve and invest and highlight some of the women that have been coming, that have stories that came up to you, that came up to me, that came up to Chelsa, or talked to Angela, because either God's done something in their life or they were impacted at the conference or whatever that looks like. So to make these women feel connected with the other women, connect them with that. That's one of my favorite things to do, is just connect people. My husband says I collect people, and I don't. I connect them. I love them. I connect them. No, Val, he gets real weird with it. Him and Chelsea have a great time making people feel super uncomfortable. But I think it's hard to keep that authentic connection when you don't see face to face. But I think we have prayed over this ministry, and we've said that. We've all shared that. And I believe that God creates those opportunities to connect. And so I think we'll just try different avenues of keeping that connection and communication open. Thoughts, ladies?
Yeah, I do think that's a challenge because, your relationship with the Lord is not based solely on emotional events like this and emotional highs. Then maybe you you cried for the first time in a song, but then what happens when you go home? So I do think that's a great question, Val, and a great thing to just be, keep in our minds, because you want it to be a lasting thing, not just a feeling, right? So I think a big way would probably be through prayer, because we all, like we said, have pretty busy lives, and so do the women that came, and you can't always just get together all the time. But we can pray for each other. And I think that's just a good way. And then to also just encourage them to get connected in their own communities. So come get filled up. I mean, that's our name, right? Is Overflow. We want you to come and get filled up. And then you go out to your community and find your people and pour into them. Or if you still need more, invested into you, to be just encouraged to be like bold and asking for the help that you need, or, whatever it is, get back into church, or, find those connections that you need. And most importantly, just, be in communication with God and let him lead each person individually. Cause it's just different for each person, I think, that comes. I know I do want to share one thing about prayer and how powerful it is. We've all talked about how powerful Friday night was. And Candace's mother-in-law and Carolyn, the gal that made the delicious food for the conference, came through on Thursday night. Was it Friday or Thursday? Thursday. We were setting up a little bit, and they came through on their prayer walk, which they've been doing weekly. And they wanted to pray with us through the gym and the hallways and everything. And we got to the music room where we had Friday night's event, and we just all stopped and prayed. And I was bawling when I came out of that room. Like, it was so powerful. And we just prayed. And I think what my prayer was that God would just take possession of that room, and that it would be his, and he would do a mighty work in that room. And I feel like he showed up so big, and just things like that, they build your faith. And I think women will come and they're going to experience those things, and it will encourage them to seek that more and more, so that's, it's not just a once a year thing.
Well, and on that too, Chels, there's that verse where it says, you plant the seed, Apollos waters, and God will grow. And that's our job. I truly believe if there's somebody that we can walk hand in hand with after the conference, that God's going to provide that. But if not, I think we stand back and we just see what God's going to do, and hope to hear good feedback the year when they return, hopefully. But yeah, absolutely. The power of the Spirit was in that room Friday. Absolutely was.
I think I would say here too, because there are people listening who are in a rural community. There are people listening who are in a larger, big city environment, but haven't found somewhere to connect yet. And I think that Candace made a point earlier where, we're trying to reach all of these people, and we're trying to figure out the best way to stay connected with them. And it isn't just a one size fits all. You might find your community on Facebook, but Dolores over here isn't going to, or, Francis is going to check the church bulletin, but Stacy's going to be over on Instagram. I mean, there's just so much to cover, and not everybody is going to find it all in the same way. So how would you encourage someone who's listening today, who's like, maybe they want to do this in their own community, or maybe they just want to find a community to tap into? How would you encourage them to go about doing that? And would you encourage maybe organizing an event like this? Is it worth it?
I always think it's worth throwing a big party, and just even if 2 people come, you're going to have a blast. That's me. I know not everybody sees that, but to start with what Chelsea said, we need to pray. I would encourage them to, where you're at, pray for your people, because God has created us and designed us to be in community with each other. And I know sometimes we see, you think of a conference, you see the pictures from the conferences, and there's a lot of people, but all those people aren't connected intimately necessarily. There's maybe a couple who are. So I would say pray, and then pray for that connection with just one person. Start small. I don't know. I think there's certain things in life too. Like, you shared some hard things in your life. I know I've got some hard things in my life. Angela and Chelsea both, we all have struggles. And there's a reason that we have those struggles, because there's a verse that talks about, because there's other people who are facing the same things. So just pray. Like, I know that sounds like the Sunday school answer, but sorry, I cannot get out of my head that you said Dolores. That's hilarious. I hope you have someone named Dolores who is listening. I love that name. I think it's great. But if Dolores is needing a friend, I would just say, pray, because God hears and he answers every prayer. Whether it's in the way or the time that we want it, he does answer it. And maybe it's not going to be until next March when we have our next, annual conference. But God knows the desires of our hearts, and he's going to create and give us the opportunities. So it's up to us to be obedient and say, yep, we're going to take it. Whether that's having a coffee with someone or taking extra time to just be quiet in his presence, or to reach out to one of us, if there's questions or anything like that. But it goes back to starting with prayer, because prayer truly is us relinquishing any control we have into the Father's hands, because he is in absolute control over everything.
I think that's a really good point. And just like that, you have to be intentional if you want to have good relationships. It's going to probably take some sacrifice of your time, and just, maybe you don't feel like getting dressed that day to go out and have coffee, but it's just something you need to do. I also know, like, Sadie Robertson, who's mega famous, like, she talks about building community and how she felt so embarrassed and awkward, but she just, like, found a couple girls at church and was like, hey, do you want to come to my house for a Bible study? And she was so embarrassed and nervous to do it, and just saying that, like, it's probably going to push you out of your comfort zone, and it's going to probably be awkward, but it's definitely worth it. And also, I would say, like, don't maybe have your people predetermined, like, you might be best friends with somebody that you think you would have nothing in common with. Like, I'm, would never be friends with this person, but God will make a way, sometimes, and really surprise you in who your best friends end up being. And, he always knows better than we do. So for sure, great points. Start with prayer. The Holy Spirit is moving in our lives, and in other people's lives without us even knowing it. And then, we gotta just get to see the end results when the dots all connect. And it's pretty cool to look back at. But definitely, if you're like believing the lies that everybody else has community and I don't, I would say probably you're going to be called to take an action and go find it. Like, you might not, it might not come to you, and that does suck. Like, that's hard. It's a hard place to be in, but you might just have to go find it, and you might fail and fall on your face and embarrass yourself with a few people. But I would say just don't give up, because it will be worth it. And, I think the enemy, wants us to believe that we are alone and everybody else has friends and we don't. And like Candace said, he loves to get us in those isolated situations where we just feel like, who would want to be friends with me sometimes, and hide away. But, and it's not even just in your suffering that you need people. Like, you need people to share in your joy with too, and celebrate with you and the highs, and obviously be there for the lows, like we talked about a lot. But life's more fun with other people beside you too. So I do love that.
Amen. And I know that I've kept you guys longer than I said we would be. Part of that is technology. Part of that is me. But I will say, like, first of all, if there are people who want to know, how should we start doing this? How can we go about doing this ourselves? There are links to reach out to Overflow Ministries in the show notes for this episode. Any one of these three women would be happy to talk with you about that. And there are more team members too who aren't on this call right now. It takes a village, truly, to do this. And Kate and Rachel and Martha, phenomenal job. I was just blown away once again. I will be coming back to Bone Still. Consider yourself warned. And but I feel like Chelsa touched on it tremendously and beautifully. And one of the hardest things I ever had to hear was someone saying, if you want to find a good friend, you have to be a good friend, right? Like, it's not just because the people aren't falling in your lap that you don't have them. And so there is some work on your part to do it. And honestly, I can't wait to see the example that Overflow Ministries and this women's conference sets and how these little things are just going to explode all over, because big cities aren't the only places where these things need to happen, right? You guys have embraced that fully, and I'm so appreciative. Any parting words as we wrap up the episode? Any speaker recommendations you would like to give to other places that want to do this?
I got a long list for you, friend. Okay. No, I would just say, and it kind of goes back to the last question you had asked, mostly because if there is someone, even just one person, and her name is Dolores, and if it's not, that's okay. If you're listening and you are wondering, like, you have that itch, you are feeling that tug, ask God. Yes, pray. But like, I remember when I was sitting in that huge auditorium at the Beth Moore conference, I just felt she had said, and I'm pretty sure she said my name, but she said, pray that all in prayer, because you don't know what God's about until you allow him to do it all. And so if you are here and you're listening and you're like, I need community, I need that fellowship that Chelsa and Angela were talking about is such a need. Or if you're wanting to start a conference or even a women's Bible study or just make one friend, pray that all in prayer. Allow God to be the sole driver of your life. Allow him to just direct you where you're going to go, because he opens up doors, he closes doors. And sometimes that's really hard. But it's important, because if he closes one, it just means he's got something better down the road. And I would just encourage to, if it is something that is really heavy on your heart that you feel you need to start or you want to be a part of or do, and that's a vision you feel the Lord's giving you, hunker down, sister, hold tight, and you go where the Lord leads you. But remember, that's a vision God gave you. I heard one time that your calling was not a conference call. It was a direct call to you. So it might not always make sense to everybody else, but be faithful and be obedient to what God's calling you to do, because he will provide the women, he'll provide the fellowship and the connection you need to make it be what God's wanting it to be. But you've got to allow the proper steps to take place. So I just allow the uncomfortable, allow the awkward to happen, because when you say yes to Jesus, all bets are off and all things can happen.
Yeah, I love that, Candace. This, like, wherever God's leading, try and be faithful in that and just obedient. You don't want to get ahead of him. Sometimes we've talked about that in our group. You know, you want God to go before you and make the way, and then you just can walk in that path that he's prepared. But I don't think that means limit yourself or your ideas. And don't let people discourage you. If you really feel like God is leading you to do big things, then go do the big things. And if that's not the feeling that you have from the Lord, that maybe you should start a small group in your church or your community, or invite one person to church or coffee, whatever it is. That's a big thing too, if that's what God is asking you to do. So yeah, the conference is awesome and it's so fun. And yeah, it's just a great time to get together with believers. And obviously we try to invite people that maybe aren't churchgoers or don't know where they're at in their relationship with Jesus too. But to have that fellowship of believers, like you talked about, Val, is something really special. So I would say, if you're not in a position to create it yet, go experience it and like take in this information. From us, we're not professionals by any means, but we're doing our best, and go experience it and just find these little nuggets here and there and see what might work for you and your group and your community, wherever that might be. God he's a big God, and he can do big things with your yes. So I would say that just be open to it, like Candace said, in prayer, and then just stepping out in obedience wherever he leads you. And it's exciting. It's fun. It can be scary and it can be weird, but it's great. It's always worth it.
Well, ladies, thank you so much for coming and sharing about the whole conference experience, start to finish and beyond. Candace, thank you for returning to be on this panel. And Chelsa and Angela, I look forward to your solo episodes upcoming at some point in the future. I just really appreciate you sharing your perspective on why this type of event and ministry matters to you, and relate it to why it probably matters to those who are listening. So thank you so much, ladies.
Yeah, Thank you, Val. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of the Motherhood Experience podcast. To join our exclusive TME community, head over to themotherhoodexperience.com/learn more. Be sure to follow The Motherhood Experience on Facebook or Instagram, and please leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, leave us a comment below, and we'll catch you next time.